250 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, sharecropping, the Ku Klux Klan, lynchings, bombings, mass incarceration, the separation and destruction of the black family. All of that has had an effect on our mind. Our mind needs to be decolonized. We today are experiencing mental slavery, not physical slavery as once our ancestors had to endure. In my book, 7 Steps to Decolonize the Mind, we take you through every step to start releasing the chains that's on your mind. He or she who controls the mind control the person. It is in a vested interest of the white supremacist system to keep your mind bogged down in a mental slavery, throwing entertainment, throwing drugs, throwing alcohol, anything they can at you to keep you bogged down. You got to free yourself from mental slavery by purchasing our book, 7 Steps to Decolonize the Mind, today on Amazon. Make sure you share it with your family, share it with your friends. Everyone can benefit from decolonizing the mind, because once your mind is decolonized, you will never be put to sleep again.
Welcome back to the African Diaspora News channel. My name is Richard Sudan. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe and support the platform and spread the word. So the news we're hearing today is that Ed Buck, the Democratic political donor, has been found guilty on 9 felony counts. He's been found guilty of luring men back to his apartment to give them drugs in exchange for sex. And we know that in at least 2 cases, he injected drugs into black men, leading to their death. Now, of course, his being found guilty is on the one hand positive and cause for celebration, but let's see what sentencing he receives in a few weeks' time, or whenever exactly the sentencing takes place. Let's see what happens. But of course, this reminds us really of the severity and the wholesale abuse of black men at the hands of wealthy abusers like Ed Buck. So we're going to see as time transpires how this really pans out. But I think there's a few takeaways really in the initial aftermath of the reaction to the news that Ed Buck was found guilty. The overarching reaction for me really was lack of a reaction, lack of headlines. I was looking on social media and checking out news headlines yesterday. And of course it made news, but you would think that a serial abuser of Ed Buck's nature, that had abused multiple people leading to their death, might be major headline news, especially with his political ties. Now, of course, it did make some headlines, but not nearly big enough when you consider the severity of his crimes. Now, what really stands out to me is the following. We know that we live in an extremely privileged system in the sense of white privilege. Now, there are numerous umpteen examples of black and non-white people who have actually been completely exonerated and found innocent by the system, and yet they've received more of a vilification in the media than Ed Buck has received. There are black people who have been found innocent, entirely exonerated, and yet they've been hammered by the media, and they're not guilty of killing people or doing actions that led to anyone's death. Now, I think what's really clear is we can think of other examples here, which really shines a light on how inherently biased the system is. The 2 major examples really are, I would say, Prince Andrew here in the UK, and of course Jeffrey Epstein, who Prince Andrew was linked to. Here are 2 guys who were really linked to a global system of industrialized abuse that had taken place over many, many decades. And really, just like Ed Buck, of course, Prince Andrew, we should say, has never been found guilty of any crimes. He's never been questioned. But many people have questioned his links to Jeffrey Epstein. And the case of Jeffrey Epstein is very well known. And yet we see a sort of double-sided media. We see a media that really doesn't have nearly as much focus on the Ed Bucks, the Jeffrey Epsteins, or the Prince Andrews as they do for other people. And so, and also regarding Ed Buck, there are a lot of people that really feel Ed Buck should have faced some sort of murder charges. That's probably another question for another day, but there are certainly people that have made that call. For now, we can see he has been found guilty on 9 felony counts, but I'm dubious, I'm skeptical. I want to see what kind of sentencing this 66-year-old man gets. And of course, this is a wealthy white man who had been a serial, you could say, abuser of people over a long period of time. He had a fetish for bringing black men, often homeless black men, back to his apartment to inject them with drugs, oftentimes when they were unconscious, and that led to the deaths of 2 men. So these are really serious charges, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ed Buck gets some sort of slap on the wrist, thinking about his connections, his influence over the years. And of course, this is a man who's been a very well-known political activist and democratic political donor. He's been found guilty on all of the counts as far as I can see, but don't be surprised if the sentencing doesn't really reflect that. These are very serious charges. This was a very serious case with Ed Buck, and actually from what I can see, it took really quite a bit of pressure from different individuals to really make these charges stick, for there to be a trial in the first place. A lot of people think, had there really not been a sort of high profile push to really get these cases looked into, he might have literally gotten away with his actions. But for the time being, he has certainly been found guilty of, carrying out actions, injecting people with drugs, black men, which led to their death. The families, of course, I think have welcomed the verdict. But now the key thing here is the sentencing. But I really wouldn't be surprised if we see a sort of sentence carried out which really doesn't reflect the severity of the crimes. The reality here is this is a man who's a member of the LGBT community. He's a very white, powerful individual who carried out the serial abuse. And you can call it abuse really, because when you're of an extremely privileged background and you're luring people who are from a much poorer background and you're exploiting them, you're abusing them, these are very serious charges. Very serious charges indeed. And you can only imagine, I mean, when you just consider, for example, how black people who have actually been found innocent get completely vilified in the press when their actions haven't actually even led to the death of anybody, you can see the paradox at play here. I really think that Ed Buck has got a very easy ride, certainly regarding the media coverage. The media coverage has been quite minuscule really compared to the severity of the crimes, and I wonder if we're going to see that kind of disproportionate lack of focus reflected in the sentencing, especially given this man's connections and his track record with rubbing shoulders with extremely powerful people. But let's see. For now, Ed Buck has been found guilty. Let's see what happens in the near future. Let us know what you think about this topic in the comments. We'll keep you informed and updated about this story. Right now, I want to thank you very much for tuning in. As always, this is the African Diaspora News channel. My name is Richard Sudan, and we will see you next time.
If you are over the age of 35, stop everything you're doing right now. After a lifetime of eating fatty foods, you may run the risks of a stroke or heart attack due to plaque buildup in your veins and arteries. To learn how you can reduce your risks, visit youthfountainlab.com or call 1-800-853-7856 today. This may be a life-changing call for you or someone you love. Thank you, and we hope to hear from you.
Hello, everyone. Please make sure you subscribe to the African Diaspora News Channel app on these platforms.